Welcome to the Upside Down podcast, where each episode we discuss a question that's come up in our journeys with Jesus and his upside down kingdom that we want to understand God's ways in. Join us as we seek God's heart together.
Good.
All right. Hey, welcome back, guys.
Great to be back.
Thanks.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Juan, you were saying episode 8. Are we that far in?
Ocho.
Ocho.
Yeah, episode 8.
That's
right
incredible.
Now. Yeah.
Wow.
Dude, your legs are looking good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Swickley YMCA.
Come on.
If you want to hit me up for my workout regimen, I'll send you my Venmo.
It's only my program's only $200 per month.
I'll also send you my epic morning routine.
Yeah.
I've got a new brand of charcoal toothpaste that's coming out too.
And I'll send you my tutorial on how to be a real man.
Oh man, that's funny. That's
good.
funny. Okay, so here's what I want to know this time around. Here's what I want to know from you two before we dive into things. If you walk into a coffee shop, what's your go-to order? There's so much you can tell about a person by what they say. They're like, "Can I get a venti pink drink, light ice?" It's like
You dog.
Yeah, it's like, hey, with confidence. Like
Yeah.
I've done that before. I've been like, hey, let me get a grande pink drink, and like sometimes the barista will. For those who are audio only, one of our lamps just turned
I
right
didn't
off.
like that light to begin
You gotta
with.
say it
Yeah,
with
right.
confidence. So anyway, I'm curious. Not just Starbucks. But you walk into a coffee shop.
Well,
And,
I mean, my answer is based on where I'm walking into. So like,
All right. Let's go step by step. We won't take too long. But Starbucks, you walk in. What are you doing?
I switch it up.
Bro.
I'll be straight with you.
Cake pop.
Traditionally, it's
I want the fox.
traditionally
Give me the owl.
it's a caramel latte, but lately iced coffees.
Caramel.
No. Yes, he said it correctly.
Caramel.
Thank
You
you.
sound so
Caramel.
pretentious.
There's two A's,
I don't
man.
care.
There's two A's.
Whatever.
I'll go with that. Caramel latte.
You're from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Caramel.
Ced, what about you, buddy?
Dude, it's just black coffee.
Yeah.
Every time.
I know. You're a black coffee stan, and I love that.
Yeah.
That's
And we were talking about this at work. We were doing this thing called Strength Finders, and one of my strengths is harmony. And so I don't like to overcomplicate things. I just want things to run smoothly.
Yep.
And so, like, us as a staff, we're ordering all these drinks that are, like, ridiculous. Like, so, like, matcha, like...
Orange blossom
Yeah.
cold brew with
Like crazy.
orange dreamsicle foam.
And then they're like, Ceddie, what do you want? I'm like, just give me a coffee.
Yeah.
I don't think... I don't try to make it like, oh, I'm a man, I get black coffee. Honestly, the reason I do it is at first was like a weight thing where it's like I try to cut out like little things of calories here and there where I can. And black coffee was easy for me to do, like not even like cream or anything like that.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Here's what I feel about the coffee shop black coffee drinker. You're spending money for nothing. You're just paying for a place to hang out because you could easily just buy.
No, actually,
I adamantly disagree.
I very much disagree because, okay, so the place that I go for coffee is the best black coffee that I've had.
Come over to my house, bro. Come
But-
over in the morning for coffee.
But here's
You get that Folgers rocking.
Nah, bro, Aldi.
But here's the thing: it's the black coffee is the cheapest drink, and it's the greatest indicator if that place actually makes good coffee.
Thank you. That's what I was gonna say. Like if you go to a coffee shop
Espresso.
and their black coffee is not good, you know that it's actually not a good coffee shop. Like
Yeah.
people, it's easy to make all of these sugary drinks and to put all the syrups in there
Because
like
you can't tell what the coffee tastes
No,
like.
exactly,
Yeah.
and it's just all a cover up. But if you can go to a place and you have their black coffee and you can like taste the notes of the things that are supposed to be in it, that's how you know. It's like this place is legit.
Okay.
And the places that he's talking about, I love. They roast their own beans.
I'll just say it.
Yeah,
Press House and
Coffee
Swickley.
It's
It's great.
What?
It's super good. We love them, and their stuff's great. Yeah. So I also like.
Mediterra is good too, though.
It is pretty good.
Nobody's coffee. Like I'll go to another place, and then like I'm just like this just isn't as good. Some
Yeah.
places are close, but they're
And
just not as
consistent.
good.
You feel that
Yeah. Oh,
super
it's like-
consistent.
yeah.
super consistent. Yeah, I agree. If I go in the morning, like I'm just a black coffee dude. If I'm getting coffee with someone, And like, if I'm not gonna be the one paying for it, then I'm like, let me give it a shot, you know. And so I'll mix it up.
Then the
But
person buying's
recently
like
I've been
$8. What
yeah, like let me get that Orm's donut too. No, but recently so I tried an espresso soda for the first time, which is like club soda espresso over ice. Really good. It was awesome.
It's like an Americano, just a sparkling Americano.
It is. It's like not everyone's gonna. It's kind of like a highball where like it it accentuates all the flavors of the coffee in a way that allows you to like taste it better. Really good. So I was a fan of that. So I think I'm gonna start giving that a shot. But black coffee, I agree.
Yeah. You ever done a espresso tonic?
I think it's the same thing.
No. Tonic, like tonic water, not club soda.
Oh, no, I have not.
All right.
Yeah. Just okay.
It's like the same thing, but I was just, because it's like bitter, you know what I mean? Like the tonics.
What's the difference between those two things?
Tonic is like tonic water, like with the quinine and stuff in it.
With the what nine?
You know, like a gin and tonic.
Yeah.
That's made with tonic water, not club soda.
In my brain, those have always been the same thing.
It's pretty much like a bitter tasting soda. Like there's sugar in it.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it actually tastes like something.
Yeah. Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Oh.
There you go. You learn something new every day.
For next time. But
Well,
for
good
those of
question.
you, for everybody listening, feel free to make whatever judgments that you would like to about our character based upon our coffee shop orders.
If you put it in the comments, we will judge you as well. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. If you don't like coffee, that too, we can, take.
Wait, hold on. Did you see the podcast with Theo Vaughn and Mark Zuckerberg?
No.
Okay, I watched some of it, and one of the most awkward interactions I've ever seen was Theo Vaughn was like, "So do you like drink coffee and stuff?" And then Mark Zuckerberg's like, "Nah."
That's it. That's the end of the.
And then there's like a pause. He's like, "Really?" he's just like, and then Theo Vaughn's like, "Yeah, you seem like one of those people that had to like Google how to act like a human being." And
So funny. Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's a video of Mark. Like I've seen some clips of Zuck. Not that I don't know anything about him, but there's this one video of him in his backyard just like smoking meats. And he's just like live streaming himself talking about how excited he is
Mark
to smoke all
Zuckerberg?
these meats. Yes. It is so funny.
I'm a man and I like smoking meat.
Literally. And it's like people.
You believe me, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the comments were like, this is what an alien would do if they were trying to act
Hello,
like an
fellow
average
humans.
Joe.
Yeah.
Hello, fellow humans. Look at me and my meat smoker smoking all of these.
That's funny.
Anyway, sorry to veer.
Yeah.
To do the weave there.
That's really funny. No, that's okay. So I'm really curious to hear what's been going on in your
in our
you
noggins.
guys, in your noggins and in your hearts. So anybody care to
Yeah, who's itching right now?
kick us off?
Who's
I
just ready to go?
I can start us off because mine's like a nice smooth cup of Joe.
Dude, I feel like you're a softball kind of guy.
No, what does that mean? Oh, like
Is in like I was gonna say like you like to play softball or you like to toss up, the easy ones. Yeah. Slow pitch.
I mean, I feel last episode I came in pretty heavy, so
Did you see how offended he got? He's like, what? What does that mean?
infield or outfield?
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. No, it's like sometimes I think you need a little break, between some of your heavy hitting questions. Or I also was on an international trip, so my mind has been elsewhere. But of all the things that I could have asked, this is kind of the one that intrigued me the most for this episode. And that question is this: can you share something, a belief that you've had as a Christian that you've changed your mind on or changed your opinion on? And I'm not so much interested in like defending a point or something like that, but I am interested in maybe the process that got you there or what led you to having a change of opinion on something that you felt strongly about at one point. And I can start if you guys need a second.
Go ahead. Oh wait, or unless you had something.
No, I mean I do have something, but Yeah, I do have something.
Then
I was
go
going to
ahead.
say, I was raised going to an EPC church, which isn't a bad thing at all. I loved it. I loved my youth group.
Which
But
is
we were
what?
talking about,
for the people that don't know what that is.
Evangelical Presbyterian Church, where we talked about how many point Calvinists we were when we were in like 8th and 9th grade. And so if I was to say a thing I've changed my opinion about, that would be it, right? Because I remember one year we were taking a trip down to like the beach, and we were like having these discussions in the car about, like who's predestined and how can we tell, and like all of the different things. And I used to be really caught up in thinking about that, but I was never like hardcore exclusively predestination. But I think the Lord just kind of brought me in a journey of, I've talked about this on the podcast a lot, like understanding the authority he gives us as human beings, in the course of history. And like, of course, that God has chosen those, like he does, the Bible says that he has predestined those who are going to be with him. And yet at the same time, he also gives people free will. And so I used to view it as a binary thing, that they are contradictory, that those two things can't coexist. But that's not true. Like, we see a lot of things as binary and contradictory that aren't, and there's natural things that happen like that in the universe. Photons, actually, science thing. How about that?
Whoa.
Photons.
Neil deGrasse Tyson over
they
here.
function both as a particle and as a
Get him on the podcast.
They function both as a particle and as a wave, and that scientifically shouldn't be possible, and yet it is. Like, fundamentally, that's how they work, light particles. And so there are some things that to us, they shouldn't be able to operate how they do, and yet to God, he makes them work in harmony. And so I didn't go, I'm predestination and now only free will. It's like, actually, it was very much the opposite, where I was like, oh no, it's both of these things. The answer is both. And I'm okay with that. And I've learned to be content with the fact that I don't need to be God. But the journey that led me there was just being humbled by people who had really strong arguments about their thoughts that were different than mine, and in listening with my ears open, not trying to defend. I guess I was trying to defend what I thought, but not trying to like listen with, making a list of counterpoints when they're talking, but like listen actually and take in the things they're saying. And so like over the course of time, the Lord was just, he was really gracious and kind of shifting my heart posture, because I'm not saying everyone has this, but I felt like I had a pretty arrogant idea of what I thought was right, because I needed to have God fit neatly inside of the categories I had established for him. And then he was like, no, dude, I don't need to play by your rules. Like, I do what I do because I'm the creator. And that was a moment that helped me a lot. And so, yeah.
But I'm going to, ask you to go a little further on this. So like, articulate for me, like I'm a third grader. Mm-hmm. So you were more binary, predestination. Just articulate more.
Yeah. Okay. So I used to think that exclusively, like, there were people who were predestined and those who were not predestined.
That's what you were taught.
Yeah, that's what I was taught.
From the church you grew up in.
From the church I grew up in. There were those who were chosen by God to be saved, and there were those who were predestined to go to hell. And so that, to me, I was like, oh, wow, that's really intense. Now, like, of course, the Bible.
So are you saying that you always kind of had it never really sat with you? Well, like 100%.
I would say that there was a point where I would say that that's what I believed for sure. But also, it didn't sit with me in a way that I was like, I feel like there's more nuance here that I don't understand.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It was one of those moments where I was like, there's more to this. And I think that I was being taught things that were too simplistic for issues that were complicated and involved really like detailed things. And so those concepts are incredibly important and real. Like the Bible talks about both of them, and they have huge implications. But yeah, it didn't sit very well with me. And in light of that, like the Lord, pushed me in the direction of
like
leading me to where I am now.
Or give us an idea of
so over
when
the
this
course
started happening.
Yeah, so I would say as I went from like early high school into my later high school years, and as my faith grew, earlier on I was like, I knew that I was a Christian, but I was more arrogant in my faith. And also there was like less fruit in my life. I held really strongly to the things that I believed, probably as a defense mechanism for the fact that I was like sinning actively. So yeah, but as I went from like younger to older, I would have discussions with people about it and then spend time in the Word or spend time actually doing my own research about it. And then having conversations with people who disagreed. And when I went off to college, I went to Liberty for college, and I had many conversations with people who disagree with me, or like professors. And they would share their stances on things, and it led me to that stance. But that was like early on, yeah, like in my later high school years, and then in my freshman year, I came like more solidified in it. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yes, but so now in closing, so now you believe
Both.
Both, yeah. Now I believe both. Now I think that formerly I would have said that it's exclusively predestination. And now I recognize that that's an incomplete picture. And there's more to it than that. And that it is, yes, predestination, and it's also free will.
Yeah.
And that God doesn't need to play by the rules of what my little human mind can comprehend. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, I totally agree.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
I was kind of in that space as well. You know, you go in and out of things, and I think whenever I was an early Christian, like you would watch a lot of preachers online and stuff like that, and the Reformed Presbyterian guys are extremely prolific.
Yes,
online,
and like super confident.
Yeah,
you know what
extremely
I mean?
confident.
And that I feel like that binary black and white. This is right. This is wrong. And not to say that. Yeah, that just I think it draws people in because it makes them feel like they have a little bit sturdier ground instead of diving into the nuance, which can be difficult.
Yeah,
you know.
And I will say I don't think I've ever been more miserable as a Christian than whenever I was like fully in the predestination, because it puts you into the mindset of like nothing I do matters.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can do anything. Like if I'm chosen, I'm chosen. But what if I'm not? Like I could be just not a Christian and I'm walking around. But in the Bible over and over again, like people take action. People are obedient to God's commands. And like your mind and how you react to things that God puts in front of you does make an impact. So your actions are more important than you think. But predestination, and for me, I'm probably a little more weak-minded than some people, but like I would just go into this thing where I'm just like, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because if it's all written, I'm just a robot, and everything's going to happen anyway. You know?
Yes.
I would push back and disagree on that. I think it. So I guess a follow-up question for both of you is, since you both stated that that was a belief you had as a younger Christian, that you then grew to learn something else. So now as an older Christian, if you think now with your the understanding that you have now and the education that you have now and the skills that you have now to interpret and to process information, do you think it would benefit you to go back and revisit that now as an older person to see if maybe logically, since you understood that as a young man, maybe now your understanding of it would be different, maybe more complete or more full?
I think the thing that, this could be true for you too, I'm not sure. The thing that kind of made me a more mature Christian is that I don't have all the answers. And I refuse to box in something that is eternal and mysterious. And the more that you learn that you're not God, you don't have all the answers, you never will until you get to heaven. Hopefully we get all the answers whenever we get to heaven, but like to just judge other people, which the Reformed Presbyterian, I mean, and I have nothing against, like, I think the Reformed Presbyterians like have a lot of good to give.
Yes.
Especially when it comes to conviction, sin, all that stuff. But to judge and to be so certain in something that you just cannot be so certain about,
right,
is that's maturing for me.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and a big marker, in your maturity as a Christian is your capacity to tolerate paradoxes that, like, it has to be one or the other. I don't understand It just is. You know, like I had a conversation with one of my lifelong best friends, and we were talking about why do bad things happen to good people? Because he's endured a lot of stuff that, I mean, like, is really, really awful, and he shouldn't have had to. You know, it's like, okay, well, you know, I forget who the quote. Maybe it's an A.W. Tozer thing where it's like, someone said, show me a good person.
That's
you know what I mean?
Sproul.
Yeah, R.C. Sproul or whatever.
So.
It's like, you know, why do bad things happen to good people? It's like, well, show me a good person, you know, because there aren't any. And that's true. But in the same vein, it's like, read the book of Job, you know, literally it says that he was innocent. And like, that's what starts the book off, is that God is in the throne room in heaven. He's like, look at my servant Job. He's righteous. He's obedient to me out of his heart. He's doing all that he can. And then God gives Satan the authority to destroy this guy's life. All of his kids die. All of his possessions are ruined. And so like, I hear that, but also like, there's some things we just can't understand, you know, and like there's lots of beauty in the pursuit of theological understanding and trying to like fully grasp the concepts that are there. But there has to come a point where we are just content saying you are God and I am not. And that's where Job comes to, because he spends chapter after chapter after chapter defending to his friends and then reconciling, like trying to reconcile with the Lord all of the things that have happened to him. And he like eventually just calls into question the character of God, and God is like, who are you to question me?
Yeah.
You know, like gear yourself up like battle for a man. Like that's literally the Lord's like, get ready, stand up, because we're going to do this thing, you know? And he's like, where were you whenever I laid the foundations of the earth? And like, dude, you just have to be content ultimately, knowing like God is God, I am not. The pursuit of wisdom and knowledge is good, but like we got to be okay with sometimes not knowing. It doesn't mean not pursuing wisdom and knowledge, but not having it be complete, you know? Like life on this side of heaven is an unfinished symphony, man.
Ooh, that was poetic. Dude, you're such a poet, man.
So that's your
answer? This guy's got it all.
That's your answer as well? The same as his?
Yeah.
Okay. So mine is...
Oh, wait. Oh, my... No, sorry.
You were adding to his?
I was just adding to his.
What's yours?
I mean, I don't really have one. I wouldn't say it was such a big flip. It's kind of like this deal where it's slightly just moves a little bit. And that's happened with a lot of stuff. I can't think of like everything right now. But one thing that for some reason came to my mind is my understanding of like tongues in the Bible.
Yeah.
To where like at first I grew up and I became saved in a very charismatic mindset. And I had this idea. It's like when you're baptized by the Holy Spirit, then you just speak in tongues.
Yes.
And tongues sounds like the gibberish that people are singing on stage at charismatic churches and stuff. But the more and more I kind of understood and read into like the gifts of the Holy Spirit that he gives, and how, you know, Pentecost, whenever they started, the people understood their language and the gift, and God gives gifts to different people like prophecy, tongues and stuff like that. So obviously the gift of tongues is a very practical gift that is given, and then it calls for interpretation. Yes. Now, in my mind, where I'm at right now, there's two different types of tongues, and we've talked about this, I think, before, where you have the gift of tongues, which I believe is the supernatural or natural ability to just speak another language. I've heard of testimonies where people are like, I was in this thing and I was in big trouble, and somehow I was able to speak Mandarin and get out of this situation by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
There you go. There's like the gift of tongues and stuff like that, which is just another language. And maybe you could say people that have the gift of tongues in more of a practical sense are just people that are bilingual, trilingual, people that study languages, and it is a gift in order for evangelism to do that. And then I also believe in prayer tongues, which is just murmuring to yourself, which you should keep to yourself. And I feel bad. I forget the reference in the Bible, but where, and I think it's Paul, like if you don't know what to pray, just start mumbling in your spirit, your soul, like you'll know what you're praying, you know, and stuff like that. So I think there's those two different distinctions where at first it's like, no, you're baptized by the Holy Spirit, you start speaking gibberish when you pray out loud in front of everybody. Yeah. And that's how you're super spiritual Christian. So that's kind of how it kind of changed for me with that. But there's other things where it's just sort of morphed a little bit, here and there. It's not like a total 180. Like I don't not believe in tongues. Yeah. I don't not believe in miracles. It's just my understanding of them is just a little different.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that I've landed on besides that Jesus is God, and all that stuff. Like I don't know. I've really been humbled over the last few years where it's just like, nothing, Ceddie. So.
Yeah, for me, I would say I'm in that process currently with the manifestations of the Spirit, particularly by having read the Tyler Staton book, The Familiar Stranger, and just the process that we're walking through at our church leadership-wise. So that's kind of, I've walked into that with an open mind, knowing that I have certain beliefs and convictions, but they're probably, not complete. And I want to receive and learn more. And I feel like I'm in the middle of that right now, but that's not my answer. My answer, which again, I think is probably going to make me,
I used to believe in free will.
The outlier and the one guy with those beliefs, but mine is infant baptism.
Oh yeah, we talked about this.
So my journey is interesting, right? Because I was raised Catholic, right, where they do sprinkled baptisms, and baptism is salvific in Catholicism. Like,
fascinating.
If you're not baptized, like, you're not going to heaven. I think maybe your best shot is purgatory. And if I'm wrong about that, please forgive me. But I think
is that
I think that's where they land.
Dante's Inferno, or
yeah, exactly.
Or sorry, Purgatorio. Hey, that's actually the second one.
Talk to Pope
they can quote it.
Leo.
Yeah. So
congrats, buddy.
Like coming out of 14th. Out of that tradition, and then coming over to through the grace of God to my faith in Christ and being born again. Then I got baptized, submerged. And so, and again, also being a young believer, it was like that was it for me. And what Catholicism, what that tradition was like to me was like so wrong, So I was like very like kind of like anti that and what we call believers baptism, which is like you give your life to Christ and then are submerged in the waters. The old goes in, the new comes out, and it's this public statement. It's also not salvific, but it's this public testament of like what God has done in your heart, and it's a witness. So, and that was it for me, and it wasn't like I was anti that, but then I went to work at this Presbyterian church, and where they did infant baptism. And again, the first time I saw it, I think my response was kind of like offended, or like what I'm not for this. Like, this is wrong. But I learned more about it, so it was a true change of heart, especially learning about what the covenant of God means and that language, and to be in his family, and the difference, just the nuances of that. And again, I guess I would like to get into it at some point. Not right.
I don't know if we're going to be able to.
But just the nuances. And so one of the interesting things is, like, more recently I heard, I listened to the debate between John MacArthur and R.C. Sproul on this issue. And, like, even though I'm with R.C. Sproul on infant baptism, like, totally don't see anything wrong with, like, John MacArthur's. Like, he's very eloquent. Like, he made strong points. I think R.C. Sproul was not as eloquent, but made, stronger points that I agree with. So, yeah, that's one where, like, through, at least in my own personal journey of growth and maturity and an understanding of certain doctrines and theology and the word and church history and all of these taken together, I believe, has provided me with enough information to say, I support this, I agree with this, I believe this, that this is right. That's not an anti believers baptism stance. I believe they're both right, under a unique set of circumstances for each. So it's not like I'm anti believers baptism, but I do believe that there is a place for infant baptism in the church. So that's the one for me.
Yeah.
Or pedo Baptist, also referred to as.
It's the worst title
that's
in
terrible.
the world.
It's Latin.
Yeah, okay. Latin or not, I stand by. That is a terrible name.
No,
I think one thing I'll say about this, though, it's more of a broad note. Like, there is something beautiful about church traditions, and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of what we do in the modern church, there's like no traditions and stuff like that. I don't know. I found myself recently yearning for a lot more, what's the word? Liturgical, church and stuff like that. And just the tradition and all that stuff, which I believe the infant baptism falls under. And Jeremiah also agrees with me. It's just a confusing practice, especially when you come from like a Catholic background where it is salvific and you're saying that it's not, but it can be, that's a topic. I thought you were going to bring that up for like a full question.
Yeah.
Still probably.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing. And it's just important to have like the willingness to listen to other people's thoughts and also research issues and go to the Word. We've touched on this like a couple of times, but just because somebody says that something is the correct biblical stance, go explore that. Like go and explore whether or not what the Word actually has to say is what that person is saying. And in addition, reference it with other thoughts and opinions, because if this one person is the only person with that take, odds are pretty high that they're off. So just like we just got to be willing to dig into things, and we can you can have a different.
And it doesn't matter
else.
how many degrees that person has.
Yes.
That's stating something. It doesn't matter. Like, everyone is prone to their own opinions and the way that they interpret things. And honestly, sometimes it can just be arrogance blinding them to something else, and you just never know. So I think that's a great point of just do the research yourself.
Yeah, that's what I kind of wanted
stuff.
to demonstrate. Is that part of the journey, of change and growth and evolution, of your understanding of certain things. And also one thing that the Lord has just really been working out in me is having grace for people who think differently, who have different opinions. It's like, unless it's heretical teaching or whatever, like, it's very understandable that people would draw up different conclusions for certain things and feel supported by Scripture in that.
Yes.
There are certain topics that are very much like that. And so it shouldn't be a cause for division. Yeah. We should have grace with others. We're all also at different stages of our growth and
we're just clay being
maturity
molded.
And development. And
come on, so good.
And
so good.
It's brothers and sisters in Christ that you're going to be with for eternity. I'm curious what that'll be like in heaven. Like, are there going to be different church services?
The pedo Baptists are over here. Oh man. And I think, I know, Juan, I completely agree and said, I get what you're saying. I think it is important to note, like, if something is heretical, don't pay attention to it. Like, when it comes to having your own opinion about what the Word says, don't make your decisions in a vacuum. Like, spend time understanding, studying, having discussion, researching, reading commentaries, reading the Word, praying. That one. Like,
Praying's
spend
good.
time praying and asking the Lord about it. But also, the Holy Spirit's in us, and we need to be, like, confident in the fact that our opinions, whether or not we are a doctorate in theology or apologetics, like, dude, you don't need to have that to have a valid opinion. And also, those opinions don't need to be divisive. Like, we don't all agree on a variety of things, and that's perfectly okay. Like, we worship the same God, and we can have different thoughts about those things and have discussions and grow because of it. Yeah. So, awesome.
Nice and easy question, right?
Yeah. No, it was great. Thanks, Juan. Greatly appreciated. So, Ced, would you like to go, or do you want me to take the wheel?
I can go. Mine is, it's a little easier. It's not easy.
I'm not buying it, bro.
No.
This is how he starts every question.
No.
It's like,
It's very different from your question, so I think it'd be a good,
Yeah.
If a Christian has the means, should they take their kid to a Christian private school instead of public school?
Oh, wow. I think it depends on
Or homeschool.
a ton of
either
different
one.
things.
Yeah.
So there's strong opinions about this, which does not surprise anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's a one size fits all answer to this. If you can, you should, because schools are, they're just, you should see them. It's just the worst, the dregs of society in public school, and everything is critical race theory and all that. It's like, okay, well, Jesus ate dinner with tax collectors and sinners and hung out with the worst in society. And so how can you be a light in darkness if you're never out in the darkness? And so I'm not saying it's the only right view. Like, dude, there's also value in putting your kid in an environment where they can, in really formative years, experience fellowship with believers, be trained up in righteousness, and learn and memorize scripture and foundational Christian beliefs. I think that's beautiful and beneficial. I also think it's beautiful and beneficial to be put in an environment where those aren't the things that are normal, and where you have to stand up for those things because you choose to out of your love for Christ. And so I have met awesome Christian friends who I adore, who went to Christian schools, and I'm like, that's awesome. And I'm surrounded by people who are sent. I've worked at a classical Christian school for 2 years. It's awesome. I love so many of the students there, and I think it's the right decision for a lot of those families. And also, I have a lot of students in our ministry who go to a public school, and that's also awesome. It's great for them, and it's put them in a position to grow in other ways. And so they're both strong in different areas, right? Like, some of the kids from the public school might not be able to talk to me about the Westminster Catechism, and what the chief end of man is, and that's fine, but also they do know what it's like to have a conversation with someone who is like struggling with homosexuality, or who completely stands against and says, God doesn't exist and I hate him and I don't, or all this stuff, right? They know how to like have conversations and love on those people and talk to them. Not that the people from a Christian school don't, but they just naturally have less experience with that because they have less opportunity to engage with folks who think differently than them. And so I think both are good and beneficial. And I think it's really dangerous if we start attributing a right and wrong on this one. And very much in the same realm of what we were talking about with Juan's question. Like, I think we need to be willing to have grace for other people who have opinions that are different, or send their kids to a different school than ours, because they're like very, very passionate followers of Jesus who do both. I went to a huge public school, and for me, I loved my experience there. I recognize that's not everybody's experience, but I was surrounded by Christian friends who loved Jesus a lot, and we all went to the same youth group, and like we were in school together and there together, and so it allowed me to have a really unique experience. And so it was a great opportunity for me to actually live as much like Jesus as I could, and I made a lot of mistakes. And there are many different things that like I should have done differently, and people who I hurt. And that's hard, but also it taught me how to stand in the face of the temptations that the enemy brings and say no. Not because I have to, because I want to, or not because my parents are controlling it, because I want Christ more than those things. And then to share my faith. And that's been really cool, because a lot of my friends who like went to school with me, didn't know Jesus at all, I've got to have conversations with them about why I believe what I believe and who Christ is and what he's done for me. And so I love like the fact that I got to do that, but I don't think one's more right than the other. I think they're both great. And those are my thoughts.
It's good.
Yeah.
Hate to burst your bubble, buddy.
Hold my beer. I'm going to come at this from a different angle. First, I think that if you have the means, or if you can order your life and be intentional about providing this for your family, then I think the best option is to homeschool your children. Because even Christian schools are just because it's a Christian school could mean very little about that. And I think that for me, again, my views and my beliefs, I think that that's a more biblical model. I don't even think that the school structure is ideal, like just for children, Christian or not. We've seen the detriment that it is to young boys, right?
Yeah.
With the increase in ADHD, increase in diagnosed anxiety. I think it's psychologist Dr. Gabor Mate, something like that.
Mate.
He's like this soft-spoken guy, but
Gabor.
he's like really smart. But talks about how like anxiety and stuff like that a lot of times is just boredom, or it's a stunted fight or flight or response. So I don't think even just a typical 8-hour school structure is ideal for children the way that it's set up. I question a lot of the things that are taught that end up being rather meaningless over the long course, when it's like, why are we teaching budgeting? Why are we teaching a lot of other practical life skills? There's a lot of issues with the public school system. While I think, your example is valid, I wouldn't discredit that. For me personally, the ideal is to homeschool. And then if you can find a good Christian school, then I think that can be a good option also. But I think a lot of the main thing that I vouch for, and kind of like one of the major problems, right, is that a lot of parents and a lot of families have used school to kind of relinquish that responsibility over their children, right? And say, well, the school will teach them, or the school will do this, and therefore I don't have to. That's one of the things that I love about homeschool or other alternatives, is that it emphasizes the role of the parents and the role of the family in their children's spiritual formation and in their education. So, and I think that is a biblical model. So I think that is the ideal. I think it's become even more important because of the deterioration of the educational system and the influence of ideology over the educational system. But for me personally, one of the main reasons is that I do believe parents have a responsibility while they are still children, which, let's give it an age of 18, right? As long as you are a child and as long as you are in my household, then I assume the full responsibility for protecting you in every sense. And I think that for me right now, in that setting, again, whether it's a public school or a Christian school, one of the problems is the access to really bad things that then become, that it's not a nail in the coffin, right? So what I'm referring to is like, even if I don't allow my kids to have cell phones until a certain age, that doesn't mean that little Timmy in the next desk is not allowed to have a cell phone with access to pornography or something that can very easily at any point be like, hey, check this out. And again, that's not a nail in the coffin for like their spiritual formation, but it creates this issue now that you have to work through, and you can argue that God can use it, but as a parent, I think it's a lot easier to not have to deal with that, right? And to create measures in your life to protect your children from that exposure, which is only going to get worse. So that, like, as a parent, that's one of the biggest factors for me. But I think I've stated lots of different reasons why my belief is that homeschooling today is the ideal if you can manage it, and I think a lot of that starts with planning, maybe even before marriage. Like, hey, this is how we want our family to look. These are the things that we do. What does that require, right? Do we have to live on one income, and can we take that journey? And but I do think there are ways that if you have the conviction that that is what's best for your family, then you can take those steps to create that.
So I think it's important that I don't know, that we talk about this too. So I don't know who said it, some ancient whatever, but wisdom from a long time ago, right? Don't prepare the road for your child, but prepare your child for the road. We've lost sight of that, I think, in a lot of ways. And there's no way for us to take the sin out of the world. And I think the longer we push back, like humans, exposure to the things of the world, I think we do a disservice to the people who we're like trying to bring up. Yeah. And so the reason I say that is I don't think that homeschooling's bad in any way, but ultimately, like, what winds up sometimes happening is that when we're never exposed to those things, then when it does come, it becomes an overwhelming. I failed to understand so many things about the way that the world actually functions that I'm overwhelmed by all of these things and dive into worldliness. And so I'm not saying that's the route of all homeschool kids, but we've seen that pattern play out many times, right? And so
I went to a Christian school, and like most of the kids, after I've have followed up with them, aren't really walking with the Lord after Christian school. It's crazy.
So I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind, because protection is huge. It's a responsibility of a parent, right? Like that's a significant thing. But I also think keeping in mind at the same time, like there are things, there will come times, and of course it's not like, I don't want my son in first grade to have to be like, no, put your phone away because there's porn on it. Like, dude, there's natural development of your brain, and like you just will not be prepared to have the wherewithal to respond in the ways that you necessarily should at some ages, which I totally hear. But that makes sense.
That's why it's so much harder now, because the access to such evil things is so prominent, where before it wasn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the parents had the ability to choose what was the inputs for their kid. Now, the parents are taken out of the equation with all of the technology, and also with even some of the ability of, like, I don't see this at every school, but like you hear about things happening at schools that people just don't know about. They're not told about until later. Right. The kids are getting taught, or they get sent home with worksheets that they're like, what?
Yeah, right.
And so it takes great intentionality for sure. But I think the reason I was saying that is because I wanted to ask specifically. So you said the best. Do you mean like that's the best for everyone? You think it's like, as a Christian, that's what you should do? It's the right thing. It's the best thing for everybody? Or like, this is the best thing I think for my family?
No, I think it's the ideal. I understand reasons why it might be difficult for people. That's why I think one of the keys is starting early to plan for that.
But so he is saying
the best. Yeah.
I mean, I think if, you have brought up earlier this week the cultural mandate. That's how things were a long time ago, like even early on in America, where education, for example, wasn't something that was the responsibility of the state, or the national government. It was like communities, homes that assumed that responsibility over their children. So I think looking at that model is, I think that was an ideal model. And so, I think it's ideal. I mean, I think there are examples of people thriving in all of those environments, as well as there are people in all of those environments that have really been hurt by them. Each of those, I think, equally.
Totally.
But I think if you can do it, and if you can, with the understanding, right, that you will assume the proper responsibility for your child's education and spiritual formation. That doesn't mean that, that you are in the back seat or that you're in cruise control. It's a big responsibility for a parent. It means that you're very, very active in that education. And I think rather than looking at worldly wisdom or things like that, I think you need to look no further than just the book of Proverbs, and a lot of the things that it states about child raising, like spare the rod, spoil the child type thing. That is probably a belief that many Christians today would be opposed to.
Yeah.
Like discipline looks a lot different, than I got from my dad.
Yeah.
But the Bible puts an emphasis on it, time and time again.
And raise up a child in the way that he should go.
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, I've seen cases where in public school or in a Christian school, parents are very involved, still, and see
I think
great
regardless,
things. But
you have to, you have to be.
The only-
Public school, Christian school,
only
homeschool,
times I
they've
see
gotta
public
be.
school workout is whenever parents are like more intentional, or the kid just caught it and was like, I'm good, and just like is able to understand that through school. I think something that you said, because I didn't come in with an agenda with the question. I really didn't know. I think me and my wife are leaning towards private school, but something that you were saying really struck me, and it's like your kids, they're in their most formative years that are going to carry like with them the rest of their life, and you're sending them 8 hours 5 days a week to somewhere where their mind is going to be trained towards something. Yep. You know what I mean? And so for me, it's like, would you send your kid to like a heretical church so that they get trained up, with a heretical thoughts and stuff like that? It's sort of the same idea where like you're sending your kids to a place where they're there the majority of the week, at least in one space, and they're learning the opposite of, in most cases, of what you want them to learn. And I also do agree with you in terms of like the school system. I mean, elementary school, like, yeah, it's against, like the whole system is against how boys function. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like nothing wrong with it, but most teachers are women, and they, as elementary school teachers, are women.
Yeah, that's a fact. That's a fact.
And
my wife works as an educator. That's true.
But especially elementary school, not really high school or higher education. But they don't understand how boys function, where, it's like they're just bored. You're not, and it's like, no, you need to sit still and you need to listen to this. And then all the girls are exceeding in school because they're getting taught something that their brains they connect with, and stuff like that. And so, I agree. I think the education system is at this point a little pathetic, and I hope there's more mandates in terms of, we've seen this a little bit recently, but technology restrictions, like banning phones from school. That would make me a lot more confident in school systems and getting rid of the crap. I don't care if you don't teach Christian stuff. Just stop teaching the opposite. You know what I mean? It's also like a religious thing, and keep the parents in the loop of if something's happening with their child. Like, I think that's like the stuff that's pathetic to me that would have never happened when we were growing up in school. And it makes me like, no, I can't trust that my kid is going to be safe, because they're not even going to tell me. You're not restricting things that need to be restricted, and you're teaching them lies,
And here's one of the most important things, right, as a parent, is that one of your most valuable resources as a parent, especially as a Christian parent, is influence over your children. And if you're doing it right, then that influence should remain intact, because your kids know that you love them, that you have their best interest in mind. You're teaching them about God. They're learning about all that. What happens with exposure, right, is that you allow other influences in, right? And you're never going to negate that. I mean, the best you can do is prolong it until they are ready to make good decisions. So I know it probably sounds old-fashioned and many people would disagree, but I have seen this play out. That's why my beliefs are so strong about it. You can talk about something, till what? Give me a good metaphor.
The cows come
till
home.
the cows come
Yeah.
home, right?
Till their ears
But
bleed.
I do believe
Still
like
pigs are flying. Yeah.
I do believe that the proof is in the pudding, and I have I have
Wow.
seen.
Is it a snack pack?
I've seen the pudding, and so I've seen this put into practice. I've seen the results, and so I do believe that, especially today, right? And it was different years ago, right? You could let your kids go out till the light goes out and then come back in, right? But today, I think we do have a responsibility to limit exposure until kids are ready. And unfortunately, sending them off to school contradicts that in a lot of ways that are kind of dangerous. But I do want to say, because there are people who are watching this who maybe are like stuck and they're like, dude, I don't have a choice. Like my kids have to go to public school. If that is the case, right, then my question is, then are you going to the school board meetings? Are you voting in local elections? Do you know all of your kids' teachers? Do you go to the PTA meetings or whatever? Like, if that is the case, then you should still assume the responsibility, like we said, of that heavy involvement. I have one of my best friends is a single dad, 5 girls. Dude, this guy spent like a month in Washington, D.C. because 2 of his oldest girls are on the law debate team or whatever, and they went to nationals in D.C. He goes on every field trip.
Yeah.
It's like, you can go, but I'm coming with you.
Yeah.
Like that level of involvement, and even more. Like attending the school board meeting. So what are you teaching, or what is this policy that you're implementing?
Yeah.
Gathering other parents, like you can still have an impact in that way. It's difficult. It's time consuming, but I think if that's your alternative, then it's to your benefit and your children's benefits to still find out how you can have an impact on that, instead of just, this is not the best expression, but like willy-nilly, just kind of throwing them to the wolves and just praying for the best.
Yeah.
I think that's a tough road to hoe.
Yeah. I think that it's also, important though to keep in mind, like influence is significant, but influence can quickly turn into idolizing control. And that is something that we cannot do. Like, God is the one who is ultimately in control. Our kids will have to be the ones who make the right decisions. And the Bible doesn't mandate an age of, at this point, they are prepared. It's a subjective thing based upon your kid, their development, and it's different for every child. When are they ready? When are they not ready to stand up to the things of the world and face them in the way that God calls them to? Like, people arrive at that place in their journey in different times and through different ways. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind, because I think in this area specifically, oftentimes it can be resigned to, I want to control everything about my child's life and control all of the inputs. That's not a bad thing, but it can be an idol very quickly. When it's like, I'm fixated on Life 360, I know where they are every second of the day, every hour of the day. It's like, this can be an unhealthy
Helicopter
thing.
mom.
And it can be a thing also that in times can grow. It can go completely contrary to God's hope of restoration for the world, which is to share the gospel with the unbeliever. And that is the opposite of a holy huddle, and it can turn into that whenever we only allow this to be. And I'm not saying that all Christian schools are this way at all, or all homeschool families are like. There are families who I've witnessed who make intentional, concerted efforts. They homeschool their kids, and then they go serve, like they'll go downtown and you serve at a soup kitchen, or you expose like. You go on mission trips to places. It's possible. Yeah. It's beautiful.
That's the way to do
it. But it takes great intentionality. Yeah. So I'm not saying that it's entirely bad, but we do need to be mindful. Like, regardless of what decision you do make, I think that the Lord can work through and will work through all of them. And I understand why people come to terms with all of them. Gianna and I both agree that we want to send our kids to public school. That's where we land on it. But I also totally get why people don't want to do that. And I don't look down on them for that decision at all. I think it's different for family to family. But I do think no matter what decision you make, there are consequences to them that put you in a position to have to respond in a particular way.
Yeah.
There are things that you won't have to worry about as a homeschool parent that like you will have to worry about in other areas, but there are other things you have to be intentional about if you do that.
Yeah.
Same with public school. There's some things you just have to worry less about. There's others that you need to be more intentional with. And so I just think considering all of those factors going into it is really, really important. And knowing the things that might stand in the way, regardless of the path you choose. Because like I love the idea of what you're talking about, but I also think sometimes it can be like, well, I just want to keep them away from all of it. And ultimately, like, I know we are responsible for guiding, the path of our children, but also like the Lord is the author of it ultimately. And I think we need to trust him with it too. And those things aren't contradictory to each other. They don't go against, but we just need to be mindful.
Yeah, it reminds me of an example of like a family that homeschooled, and then I think maybe going into high school had a conversation with their child, and I think they knew their child, they knew, what the decision was and the pros and cons and the consequences, and I think the child was like, I'm ready to, I want to do public school. I want to go to high school for public school, and for whatever reason they felt confident about that raven to make that decision. So that also comes with like parenting and progressing and maturity is like, as your child demonstrates that you can trust in them with certain things, that's one of the blessings, right? Is you're able to give more responsibility or more trust in certain areas. And that comes back to the parent of like discerning and knowing, just godliness, and what that looks like in your family and with your children. I think the main thing that sticks out to me is like just the difference between being active and being passive.
Yes.
And I think that no matter what, as a parent, you need to be very active in the lives of your children, in the schooling and in their spiritual formation, because being passive in any one of those, and like I'm sure people don't want to hear it, because it's like, I'm tired. There are parents, right, who it's like the 8 hours at school is a break, and you don't want to judge them for it, but just say like there's a risk in your approach. If your approach is more leaning towards passivity rather than being active, which just requires more effort.
I gotta do. Yeah.
Well, we got you some mood lighting for your question.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
This might be a deep track. I'm just gonna. Do you guys ever see the SpongeBob episode with the hash slinging slasher?
Oh,
There's
yeah.
No. In the end, he's like flipping the light on.
Right.
That's what that did.
There's an age difference
for audio only listeners, one of our lights here in the room, two of them, they were like flipping on and off as we're trying to talk. It took me straight to that where I'm like, the hash slinging, the slash slinging.
Was it end with nose for raw too? Is that what it was?
Yeah. It was so funny. But anyway, guys, interesting. That was very interesting. I'm sure, like, as we actually, the time comes where we have kids, we're gonna have to.
Yeah, when the time comes when Juan has kids.
And a great resource for anyone, wanting to know more, maybe even about my views or whatever. What that has influenced me is a book called "Shepherding a Child's Heart." So I would recommend that.
Or just keep watching our podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. So
like and subscribe, baby.
Yeah. For some reason, my brain was like, "Is he like a good neighbor?" No, not what you did. Okay, so here's what I've got. You guys will agree with the first part, but I have a follow up.
Whoa.
How deeply do you guys think our families of origin impact the person that we are?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Oh.
What's the second part?
We'll get there.
Oh, okay.
Whoa. Slow your horses, buddy.
I mean,
goodness gracious.
Yeah.
This guy.
All about pace right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for me, this is an interesting question for us, and I don't think age necessarily dictates, your ability to process something like this. But for me, at least, as I've gotten older, I feel like I've learned more about this to the point where, yeah, I mean, I've learned that the answer is it impacts profoundly in every way.
Yeah.
And to the point where I had to work through that for my spiritual formation, for breaking bondages of sin, breaking patterns of sin. So, like,
would you say like generational patterns of sin?
Well, yeah, generational. Yeah, absolutely. And then even like my views of God based on my relationship and my experiences, like with my father.
Yes.
Things like that. Actually, we just did a trip to Colombia, and so part of my issues, like with my dad, were like idolatry. Like my dad, he's my hero when I was younger, and like I just wanted to be everything that he is, and then the Lord took him from my life, so that created just a mess in my life, and had a lot of baggage from that, and counseling was involved in processing all of that. And then it's to the point where like I would go to Colombia to visit him, and the dynamic of the relationship would immediately transform us back to where we were before.
Yes.
Was where like I was his child.
Yeah.
And like that was the dynamic, right? Yeah. And like this trip was one of maybe the second trip, but where I was more in tune to the reality that like for one of the first times my dad wasn't, because now I've worked through like all his flaws, all his imperfections, to just like who he is. And like, so like that image and that idea was gone. And so I wasn't placing any unfair expectations on him or casting any of these lingering things on him. It was like, we were just friends, and I was like, I just love who my dad is, and like just having him as a friend. I don't need him to fill this void of like, oh my, like he is my father, and so that relationship is still there. But I guess I felt the healing from it.
That's beautiful.
It was really cool. Good. But yeah, sorry, that just brought that to mind, and so I wanted to share that. But yeah, like
no apologies necessary.
Immensely.
Yeah.
I would say some, but maybe sometimes people put too much weight on it, in my opinion. I can only go back maybe like 2 generations, to where I can see patterns, but nothing that I've struggled with and that I can see or know from my family history. Everything that I've struggled with seems to be a little like newer, like 1 or 2 generations and stuff like that. So in that way, I think it is important. I think it's important to know where your shortcomings could be based off the past. But then I think there's this aspect, I think for me, is not overthinking it. I have God, and I have the Holy Spirit. With the Holy Spirit, I can overcome anything. And so how much of an impact? I think it has an impact, and it will have more of an impact if you're not aware of it. You know? So
yeah. I mean, that's helpful. So there's a quote by a man I think we should get royalties from at this point, Pete Scazzaro. He says Jesus might be in your heart, but Grandpa's in your bones.
I remember this. I remember
and
this
so
part of the book.
He talks about the reality that you can totally be saved, but completely unaware of some of the issues that exist in you. And also, some of them aren't even necessarily sinful. A lot of them are, but some of them are just like your autopilot ways of functioning, which are fascinating things to understand. When you, like, whether it's like time management or those kind of things, you just like pick up on those things. This is the caught not taught kind of stuff.
How you deal with money and all that.
Exactly.
Stuff.
Like when you have extra money, what do you do with it? You're like, vacation time. Like, we should save so that we can, our responses in those ways very much are influenced by our families in ways that I think are really, really interesting. And so, it's really important. I do think some people are like perhaps place too much emphasis, and I don't mean on your family of origin as in your parents or, your grandparents, but I mean 10 generations back, this person did this thing, and that's why, I think we need to be mindful, you know what I mean, of not just casting things out into the I'm broken because my
it's
10x grandfather
a
did
mentality or something like that.
But I do think we are formed to profound is a great word, profound levels by the people that we were raised by, the people we live by, and there was the second podcast that Practicing the Way released. It's in their Rule of Life series on community. They're talking about family systems and how much they can form us. There's a couple who's done a lot of work on this. They talked about how your family can push your buttons because they made them. And good. I was like, that's hilarious. I mean, they know how to press the things that annoy you because they are largely responsible for why you are the way you are. So it's of course they know how to make you frustrated because they are the same way, or they produced in you that thing. And so, I think there's just a lot of work to be done in this specific area for a lot of folks. And I don't mean, overthinking it, but really delving into do I look more like a child of my parents or a child of God? Is the way that I view sex and money and success and the good life and parenting and school and all these different things, every aspect of life, do I view it more like my mom and dad, or how God calls me to in light of the scriptures, what he's revealed to us, the way that I relate to people, the way I handle conflict? It's really, really important. And so we naturally grow up with these unhealthy or broken structures that lead us to make sinful choices all the time. That is just our natural knee-jerk reaction. When something happens, we respond how we were raised to respond, often. Now, there's some areas we experience redemption, but it's usually not all. And so my follow-up question is this: how do you think we can best grow out of those sinful or broken generational knee-jerk reactions?
Yeah.
Well, before you, I mean, I would think that the other aspect of it is that the Bible and Jesus also promises this abundant, fulfilling life here on earth. And I think what I experienced is an inability to move closer to that because of things, trauma, things that I had, that I needed to confront and deal with to be free from that, to experience more of that abundance and that fulfillment. So I think, there's that's where I think as far as spiritual growth, it kind of, because we all have, these things, these struggles, right? And these wounds, and sometimes we don't realize, like you said, this automatic response that we have, or these triggers, or this way of being, is not really your true self. It's this shadow self, right? It's coping defense mechanisms, right? I was just talking to someone about this. And so, you are going to be limited, in your understanding and in your growth until you eventually do some work to deal with that. What was your question?
What does that work look like? That's the question.
Yeah.
What is the work? Because I think there are a lot of people who they want freedom from that stuff, right? But I think the steps to achieving that are maybe more practical than people sometimes like to think. I think sometimes they're not intuitive, but also they're not as complex sometimes as we like to think they are, and sometimes it also takes time. There are some things that happen quickly, and healing and deliverance that really does happen way quicker than you would have thought. In addition, it sometimes also can just take time, and that's a hard thing too. So what does that process look like, do you think? And what things have you found helpful in your journey in this?
Yeah, I think awareness is first and foremost, because if you're just aware of it and then you see it being played out in real time, then you can be like, oh wait, I remember this is like this. this is a generational thing. And it kind of helps you pause and then be able to walk away from that thing. But it takes practice over time. So you have to be aware of it, because if you're not aware of it, you can't catch it in the moment, which is extremely important. And then the other thing is just give yourself a break, like
have grace. Be gentle with yourself.
You're you because of the generations that came before you. Yeah. Not everything about you is bad because it's different from somebody else. But if there are sinful behaviors, we should strive to eradicate them, just like everything else. Just being aware. I mean, an example for me, I think, is like both my grandpa and my dad would have like a tendency to disconnect and then like go to something else just to relax, not like as a addiction or something like that. It's funny, my grandpa used to drink, and he stopped drinking whenever my dad like called him out on something, and he stopped drinking. But then he went to like ice cream and, and stuff like that. So
rum raisin.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But then that's really got me. He liked his desserts. Yeah, he became a big guy and all that stuff. And so like I know I have that tendency in me to have something. If it's not one thing, it will be another thing. And so it's like, Ceddie, try to make that be God, that thing that you run to. But you're allowed to enjoy these things every once in a while, but just put them in the right place. So just try not to beat myself up for who I am, which I have, you guys know me, the biggest tendency of like, I literally hate the way I am, you know? And so try not to beat myself up too much. Yeah. And then just be aware of it.
Yeah. Dude, that's really good. I think that's something we all need to hear all the time. Just be gentle with yourself. Like Jesus is. Yeah. So we should also be, sometimes in prayer, I used to, when I get distracted, like, I'd be like, oh, dang it.
You idiot.
I suck. I'm the worst. Like, how can I do it again? I'm thinking about, and I was like, dude, Jesus never operates that way. But like, and so I heard a pastor once be like, whenever you get distracted in prayer, which happens to all of us, he was like, gently guide your conscious attention back to the Lord. And I was like, oh, why would I not do that? And you know what immediately got better? My prayer life.
Yeah, right.
Because I wasn't riddled with guilt every time I got distracted. And like, so that's big time. And also rightly done when we observe our parents and our grandparents and like the way that that's formed us into who we are. It should bring compassion out of us and not condemnation for the people who have laid a lot down to try to do their best for us. Some people's parents were not there for them. And that's an incredibly difficult thing as well. And it's a traumatizing experience as well. People are trying to do the best with what they're given. And sometimes the decisions they make that they think are best aren't wise or best at all. And they cause damage. But also like this process should bring compassion out of us for the people who are around us, to see them as human beings made in God's image who are broken by sin and doing the best they can. And regardless of like how broken that experience is, because sometimes it takes more forgiveness and more work and more time. But I just think we need to be mindful of that, like being gentle with yourself and your growth in these areas, and also having compassion and not condemnation and judgment for the people whose shoulders we stand on sometimes,
Yeah, this is for me. This is a very like complicated question actually, and complicated is not the most precise word, but there's a lot to it. Even just because of my personal journey, where I'm racking my brain to like come up with one thing, and as I look back on my journey, I can pinpoint several things, and it makes me realize that it was all of those things to get, like, God used all of those things, like counseling, like my marriage. Yeah. I'm a person that's I'm motivated internally, but an external motivation that really gets me going. So like my wife and my marriage, was huge. There's been God has used it all. And so like I'm racking my brain, and this is going to sound crazy, but for me, it even goes back to like that question about like predestination, because it's like, I'm like, maybe I took these steps, but it just feels like God moving me along the journey and the process the whole time.
Yeah.
To like what I needed in that moment, Yeah. So for me, I guess.
You also had to be open to it, though.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
But in the season, maybe there was a season where there was something else, but I happened to be open to it, the circumstances, right?
Yeah.
In that moment. Like, I've heard of emotionally healthy spirituality. We owned it. I think my wife owned it.
Yeah.
But I mistook it for another book. So I never, until you were raving about it. And like the Lord has been using that. So for me, honestly, the most precise answer based on my experience is King David, right? And King David's description of he was a man after God's own heart. I think if that is your aim, if that is your goal, to be after God's own heart, to want to draw near to him, to want to be like him, to want to know him, then, for as long as it takes, he's going to bring you through this process. And I know this is probably not the answer that you wanted or that you were looking for. Because there were, obviously I just mentioned like counseling, really benefited me at the time that I did it. And I'm so grateful for Donna, my counselor, who helped me through.
Here we go, Donna.
Yeah.
Shout out to Donna.
There's two.
My grandma's name is Donna, so I'm like, yeah, shout out to Donna.
Yeah. Love Donna.
There's been 2 times that I feel like I've seen the Lord and heard from him, and one of them was in counseling. The other one was freedom prayer. But so those moments were like really meaningful. But I think, age and experience brought me to a place of confronting things about myself along with circumstances. But through it all, it just felt like, the Lord. And so I think that goes along with like having grace with yourself, of like just understanding the journey, right? You're going to discover things about yourself that you can't change, no matter how hard you try. But you'll make progress, and trust that the Lord is undergoing that transformation within you, that he wants healing for you more than you want it for yourself. Yeah. He wants restoration for you more than you want it, more than you realize you need it. He wants it for you more than that. And so I think that, I would say, make that your pursuit is to know him, and then I guess be open, to like books. Abba's Child by Brennan Manning has been a huge book for me. My Utmost for His Highest, the daily devotional, has been a huge. Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, counseling, people that have come into my life for different seasons. There's some things that I like experienced maybe some growth rather quickly. There's some things that literally took over a decade, and maybe even I thought like, oh, I'm never going to be free of this, but he doesn't give up, so I guess it's complex might be the word that I was looking for. It's for me, and you can disagree or you can, but I think you see my heart in it. That for me, it's a very complex topic. And so the answer, I think, is complex. Yeah. Well, hopefully there's some helpful things in there, but I think, it is a journey. Yes. So I think that grace part is, and maybe sometimes when we want the practical and we want the, maybe the quick solution or like, what can I do? It's like, I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, there's some obvious things, right? If you're struggling,
like giving $1,000 to the Upside Down podcast, if you sow that seed, instant.
Man. Depending on what that is, or it's like,
I'm the worst. I'm sorry.
It's
Yeah,
like,
but for real though, if you
My
it's
Venmo
like
is.
for example, take the issue of pornography, right? Let's take someone that struggles with pornography like I did for most of my life. Viewing pornography is a sin, but it's a symptom of
Yes.
a much deeper
Yes.
so I can tell you something practical for you to overcome, to work on your issue of pornography.
Yeah.
But it's a journey to uncover the underlying issue of maybe how your dad treated your mom. For me, the Colombian culture that I grew up in is carnal, to say the least, right?
Yeah.
It's like I was born lustful almost.
Yeah.
Like I'm not exaggerating that. It's bad. It's like the plastic surgery capital of the world,
Wow.
because people are so vain. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's cheap there too compared to other places. It's huge.
I feel like that's doesn't bode great.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
it?
bro. When you excel at something, you get good at it.
Oh.
So people go there from the
A lot
US.
of practice for these
women.
people,
Flock to it.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing. So it's like you can deal with the symptom, you can deal with the problem,
Yeah.
but it's a journey. And so the best advice that I can give is make knowing God your ultimate priority, and He will, walk you through the process.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, I think just having some practical tips out there for people is very helpful, and also being aware that it does take time often, but like you were talking about, awareness is huge, and just being willing to admit I still need work. I haven't made it. I am not a mature Christian. That doesn't happen. It's just you just continue on being crafted into the image of Christ, day after day, being sanctified, and it takes time and patience, and you never arrive. And we talked about this last time though, that is true. You will not become like Christ until we are given our resurrection bodies, right? And everything is redeemed. Yet also we have to be committed to eradicating sin at the same time. Committed, sold out. There's nothing I will not do to stop this from having a hold on me.
Yeah.
And so those two things in tandem are huge. And that book, Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, has been hugely transformative for me. Freedom prayer is big. It's referred to in some circles as Emmanuel prayer, I think, or as healing prayer. There's a bunch of kind of.
Yeah.
There's different names out there for it. But imaginative, Holy Spirit guided prayer with others in the room.
Good description.
And so that's played a part of it. There's a book by a guy named Kurt Thompson called The Anatomy of the Anatomy of the Soul, and he talks about emotion and memory and attachment theory and all of these different things and the way it forms our brain and all this stuff. There's stuff out there for sure, but just keeping all that stuff in mind, we can grow ultimately more and more into the image of Jesus, and there is hope. You do not have to be a slave to your sin. That's what the Bible is about. Yeah. God wants to bring you into a relationship with Him and bring freedom. And Paul talks about that in Romans. He's the old self has passed away, the new self has come. And also, don't present your members as slaves to sin anymore, slaves to righteousness. Present your bodies as that's what we're supposed to do. And so it doesn't have to have control anymore. And so we can be committed to ridding ourselves of those things. And I think we gotta be,
And I think of, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened, or ask.
Yeah, I got you, bro.
I just had it.
Yes, yeah.
Seek and you will find.
Dude, it's getting
ask,
late. Yeah.
And knock and it will be open to you, right? So even when I say make Him your priority or whatever, that looks like, are you going to church every week? Are you getting involved? Are you serving? Are you a part of a small group? Are you doing your quiet time every day? All of these things are little check marks that keep you on that journey, provide you with accountability, provide you with learning, with education, with growth, with that the Lord uses, right? Because I feel like there's a lot of times that, where for a long time in my faith, I was on the fence. and I was hot and cold, for a long time. So I feel like I will ask myself, like, did I delay my progress? Could I have arrived, a little bit sooner? And my journey is my journey. I tend not to question it too much.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you can avoid things that, impact your growth, like sin, like going off to do things that you shouldn't be doing, like stay on the course.
Yeah.
Like I think you could get there sooner.
Yeah. And this is the last thing I'll say about it. I think another important factor that we like, all of that's great. Being in community with people who really know you. I mean, allow yourself to be really known. Like, you guys know, you don't just know me, you know, like the things about me from before I am who I am today that have formed me into becoming who I am today. And so we have to stick around in places long enough to be known by people. 1, 2, we have to be honest enough to allow others to get to know us so they can speak into our lives. And 3, encourage them to do so. Encourage people to be honest enough with us to tell us when there are things about us, our shadow side, our brokenness, our generational, like our sin, when it just comes into contact with other people, it brings the brokenness that it's already brought on us. And so we have to encourage them to speak into our lives. And there's a moment I can think of in my own life. Someone did this for me and it was hugely helpful. It was actually our campus pastor, who I love. Brad's awesome. He was willing to sit me down and be like, hey, dude, no one ever questions how much you care and love them, but sometimes they question how much you care about getting the things done that need to be done. And he was like, relational integrity, he separated like integrity into relational integrity and work integrity. And he was like, sometimes you just need to be able to get the things done you say when you say you're going to have them done, so people can rely on you and you can be consistent and like upfront, like, yeah, of course, that's a tender thing, because you're like, wow, dang it, it makes you, you could interpret a ton of different ways. But I was grateful because he loved me enough to tell me the truth, and it gave me the opportunity to grow and improve. And that's the best. Like, that's friendship. I think of people in my life who are willing to do that and be like, dude, this is an area, like, it just keeps coming up. I just need you to be aware. Like, I love you dearly. I'm not going anywhere, but just like, I need you to know this is happening. Can you really try to work on this? Like, that's one of the biggest parts of why community is such a big deal. And so allow that, invite it, ask the people in your life, if you're still with us, like, ask the people around you, what is it like to be in a room with me? What is it like to be, my friend? How is it being around me when I'm angry? How is it, like, all of that, like, invite, ask questions. How do you experience being around me? How do I make you feel? Those kind of conversations will open things up. That will bring new depths in friendships and like marriages and child-parent relationships that like you've never experienced before, or work, like boss and employee relationships. Like, it's a big deal, and so it'll open up doors, and God will bless it because He always does. So yeah, that's all I've got, gentlemen. Do you guys have any final thoughts, closing thoughts, or you want to wrap this thing up?
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up.
Yeah. I'm curious to like if former generations thought about this as much as we do.
That's maybe a question for another time.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks again for your time. Love you both very much. And for those of you who are watching and or listening, we're super grateful for you. Again, it does help a ton if you're willing to hit the subscribe button, like the video, leave a rating if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave comments. The more interaction that you can have with us, number one, it'll help us understand what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and things we should talk about on the podcast. But 2, that's a great way to show your support. So please do. We love you dearly. Thank you for listening and giving us your time. We appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
And I will say, sorry.
One more thing here.
Just that, yeah, your comments, whether they are live and in person, your feedback, your responses, or, in a chat on YouTube or whatever, they are more than just you letting us know that you support us or whatever. We've stated in the past that none of us are pastors or, professionals. We ask these questions because we genuinely seek, answers to benefit our faith and our spiritual formation, and so, the feedback that we're getting, and one of my favorite things about the podcast so far is the conversations that it's creating. I'm sure for people amongst themselves, but even as people are giving us feedback, it's becoming part of the dialogue and shaping us and forming us as people are like, here's what I think about this and here's why. And they have all this history and this experience that is unique and fascinating. So I really love that, and just am grateful to see that happening, and if there's some, like, don't be shy. I've encountered some people. Someone today was mentioning like, oh, should I comment? I'm not sure, whatever. But yeah, whether it's the comment on there, doesn't have to be super elaborate, or even in person, just coming up and saying, hey, here's what I think about that. Like, you're not just providing us feedback or encouragement, like it is actually actively also forming and shaping us, which is really cool. And there's nothing better that I personally could have asked for, is like to be doing this and yet be learning and growing because of it and through it. So thankful for that. Okay, sorry.
It's all right.
Jeez Louise. All right, we're done.
All right. Yeah. With all that being said, love you guys. We'll see you next time.
Peace.